Hello YouTube, Alan Mack with another video, and today we're taking a break from a lot of the Sega goodness. We're going to step onto the other side of the Great Divide and we're going to talk about Nintendo. And that's because I've been spending a lot of time playing my Nintendo Switch. Specifically, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. And as I was playing Zelda in particular, it got me thinking, where does this rank on my the pantheon of Zelda games? As you can tell from this little fellow behind me, I'm a bit of a fan of the series, and I thought, why not take this opportunity to kind of rate my Zelda games, or rate the Zelda games from my least favorite to my favorite. Bear in mind, these are all good games. This is just my opinion of what I like from least to best. We're going to do a top 20 essentially, and I'm going to make one omission. The Legend of Zelda GameCube collection, that's not going to be included because, well, it's a compilation of 4 games, and you basically put that as number 1. So, with that said, let's get on with it. And at number 20, we have a relatively recent game. We have Triforce Heroes on the 3DS. So Triforce Heroes is essentially a multiplayer game. It's kind of like a pseudo Four Swords Adventures follow-on. But in my opinion, it doesn't really do it quite as well as Four Swords did, which we'll see later on in the list. Because obviously this one is 20, so it's bottom of the list. It's okay. It's using the Link Between Worlds engine to try and kind of do something different, bring back some of that multiplayer stuff, but it just didn't gel with me. Definitely kind of my least favourite game that I've played for quite some time in the franchise, and one that I didn't really feel nailed its concept. But sticking to the handhelds, at 19 we have Phantom Hourglass. So the first entry on the Nintendo DS. Now I was really looking forward to this at the time because the Nintendo DS was kind of setting the world alight, really kind of innovative gameplay on different types of games. I love games like Elite Beat Agents, just something different, and I seen they were going total stylus control for Phantom Hourglass, and I thought, interesting, that's a very risky move. Will it work? Kind of. The controls work okay, but ultimately, while they let you do some cool things like drawing the route for, say, the boomerang and some puzzle solving, they don't feel as good as just traditional button controls. But the real problem with this game, the real problems, in my opinion, are, 1, the overworld is not that interesting, and 2, the dungeons aren't that interesting, especially the central dungeon, the Ocean King's dungeon, where you have to keep revisiting, keep replaying, and it's very slow and laborious, so that kind of lowered it down on my list. And actually, I got right near the end of the game and didn't finish it. That's very rare for me for a Zelda game. Funny enough, Triforce Heroes, very same thing. Got far enough into the game and just lost interest. So that's number 19. Number 18 is an oldie. It's The Adventures of Link, the first sequel. It was almost like, funny enough, I couldn't find this game. I had followed under A. So there you go. Adventures of Link. It changed the formula up entirely, so you had side-scrolling, really tried to introduce more RPG aspects, and some of those aspects, such as the evolved towns, the kind of upgrading your skills, they would come back in later entries and they would be done better. But there's a great game in this entry. There really is. But it's just kind of like flawed. It's one of those, I'd love to see them do a remake of this. The same way that they've done Samus Returns, a remake of the Game Boy Metroid. I'd love to see them do a proper remake of this. I actually don't have the NES versions. I bought the NES Classic on the Game Boy Advance when they came out. I gave it one hell of a shot trying to complete it, and I got again really near the end, and I just kept dying, and it was too much of a slog. If funny enough, if this was on an emulation system where I could cheat with save states and not have to kind of go back from the central castle time and time again when I die, I probably would persevere, and that way I wouldn't lose my leveling up and stuff like that. But I do want to revisit this at some point in the future. I did enjoy it. It's a decent game. And then, what are we on? This is 17, is it? We have the original Legend of Zelda. Controversial perhaps to put it this low down, because it is absolutely fundamental to the evolution of the series, to the evolution of video games. It is a huge game and it does a lot of stuff right. But for me, it's kind of archaic principles diminish its enjoyability. I didn't play this back in the day. I didn't even play this as my first Zelda game. I got this much. In fact, I played it. I think the first time I played it was either emulated or on the Game Boy Advance. So I had played plenty of Zelda games that came after this, and going back to the Legend of Zelda was a bit more difficult than, you know, some may have found it. If you grew up with it on the NES, you probably would have think very differently about this particular game. That being said, the formula, it really is set in stone here. You have the big overworld to explore, find the dungeons, and the dungeons contain really the meat of the challenge with lots of puzzles and combat that's really focused, you know, uncovering the map and so on, upgrading, finding new weapons that open up new areas. It really is a very good game, and for an 8-bit game, there's not that many that really would be better, but this series is an excellent series and would just go on to even greater heights. So that's why it comes in relatively lowly, but not really lowly. So, when we see 2019, 17, 18, 17, we got 16 then. I'm losing count already. So 16, we have the second DS game, Spirit Tracks. Now, when I first played this, I only played it for a little while and went, oh, it's the same as Phantom Hourglass, and didn't really give it much attention. Kind of left it for a good few years actually, and then I came back to it a couple of years back on the 3DS and I said, I'm going to give this a real good go now, because apparently it corrects some of the flaws of Phantom Hourglass, and it does. It kind of introduces some new flaws, but while you revisit the central dungeon, you have a lot of skipping. You don't have to replay the same stuff again and again. I actually found the mechanics that they introduced, where Zelda is your companion, to be somewhat interesting, changed up the formula. Zelda was actually quite a cool character to have around, very sarcastic wit at times, changed up the kind of the companion mold, and it's a fun game when it's doing those elements. Funny enough, the weaker aspects are around the train, the Spirit Tracks themselves. So you don't explore, and the same with Phantom Hourglass, you don't explore like an overworld in a traditional sense where you go wherever you want. It's very much a case of, you're in Phantom Hourglass, you're on a boat. In this one, you're on a train, so you're literally going track from track from track, and it's okay. I found it enjoyable to a degree, but I had enough of the train stuff by the time I was getting near the end of the game. And just some of the stuff like warping between areas was not handled the best. So that kept it lower down, but still fairly enjoyable. And I would have actually probably rated it a little higher if I didn't find myself actually having to stop playing the game continually and take breaks, because just using the stylus control was giving me cramps. So there you go. Physical inconvenience, perhaps just sign of age. But anyway, that's Phantom Hourglass. So next up, I'm going to have to go down for these ones, is a bit of an oddity. We have Link's crossbow training. So it's a spin-off game. Maybe it would seem odd to put this in at 15, but you know what? I actually really like this. Now, granted, yes, it was a pack-in for the Wii Zapper, light gun thing during that whole everything's got to have a peripheral phase. But this is a good game. I really enjoyed this, and it is a cheap game because they just wanted to reuse the Twilight Princess engine and get a second spin out of it, so there's very little new in it. But as a high score challenge set in the Zelda world, it's fun. Can it be compared to a traditional Zelda game? Of course not. Would it really? Could you say, like, I put it higher than the original Legend of Zelda? That seems ridiculous. But you know what? I actually had more enjoyment. And maybe it's because I played it with some friends. We were playing it for high score, challenges. So I perhaps got more out of it than others would. So, but that's why it goes in at my 15. Not exactly a common pick, I'm sure. So next two are actually, 14 and 13 are going to be games I don't have physical copies of. It's Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. And I can never choose which one I prefer. They're very similar. They feel very similar, even though one of them is, I think it's Seasons is more kind of action-based and Ages is slightly more puzzle-based. But in my mind, they were released together. They always kind of mesh together. I tend to play them together. I played them back in the day, borrowed them from friends, and I had them on the 3DS. They're good, solid games. They were done, of course, by as a flagship, who were basically a Capcom studio that worked with Nintendo, and they they really kind of took the kind of Link's Awakening concept and just rerun it again. Nothing wrong with that. Good game. They're both very good games, and I would definitely recommend trying them out on the 3DS. So that is, what was it, 13 and 14. So we're on to 12, and that is another multiplayer game. It is Four Swords Adventures. Yeah, on the GameCube. I'm going to bundle in the other Four Swords releases. I think they were on the DSi, and you could play it on the Game Boy Advance originally. This is a novel approach to multiplayer in the Zelda universe, which does not particularly compromise the single player experience to the same degree that Triforce Heroes did. And that's kind of one of my big bugbears about Triforce Heroes. It's clearly a multiplayer game, absolutely, I get it. But if you're playing solo, it really falls short. It doesn't feel as good. Whereas this game, yes, it is a multiplayer experience and it's very much designed with that aspect, but it actually offers a very solid, enjoyable solo campaign too. And it is completely different to your normal Zelda game. I don't know, is it just that I prefer the kind of Link to the Past aesthetics versus the Triforce Heroes or what? Or is it just that I like the novelty of using the Game Boy Advance when you're in multiplayer as the second screen? Or maybe just my personal experience, because we played this in 4-player, myself and some of my friends, and we had an absolute ball. Especially, 3 of us had a Game Boy Advance SPs, so we had the advantage. But my sister was playing with us. She had the Game Boy Advance original with one of those stupid lights attached to it, like flopping over the screen, covering it. Or that, you don't play with light, and complete disadvantage. So yeah, maybe just that kind of colours our judgment, but I actually really enjoy this. And I've enjoyed it as a single player adventure too. It's one of those underrated, kind of not really spoken of Zelda games. I would definitely say give it a shot. Even solo, I think it's worth a shot. Unfortunately, Nintendo will probably never re-release it, or I don't see them re-releasing it due to the kind of the Game Boy Advance, the whole multi-link system. Like, it was awkward to set up, and that kind of limits its audience back then, and even today, it's just not really likely to be ported. So if you can, try it out. If you can try it with friends, even better. But well worth a shot. And that brings us up to number 11. And that is, I kind of touched on it already, it's Link's Awakening DX. So this is the color version, but you know, slightly tweaked update version of the original Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. It is for a Game Boy game. Incredible. How they fit this onto a Game Boy cartridge, I'll never know, because it really feels more like a Link to the Past than the original Legend of Zelda. It feels more evolved than the original Legend of Zelda, despite the fact that the Game Boy is most certainly an inferior piece of hardware. So, kudos to developers for managing to get everything in. The DX version basically adds a color dungeon and just tidies up adds some color to the graphics, but ultimately it's the same game. It has some nice dungeons. It's a nice overall. It's a really kind of compact, tight Zelda experience that it's almost like a good primer for the series. It's not too expansive. You can kind of move through the game pretty quick. It doesn't do anything too revolutionary. Beyond, it's very it's self-aware. Like it's very. Some of the characters are aware that they're in a video game, which is completely bizarre. And it wasn't done by Shigeru Miyamoto's team. It was done by I think it was, I don't know, R&D1, the guys who did most of the Game Boy stuff. So you can tell that kind of slightly quirkier stuff has come from them. And the most quirky of all, I guess you could say, being the introduction of some Mario characters and some side-scrollings and stuff. But again, it's another one of those, if you have a 3DS, it's available for download. If you have the original hardware, check it out. It's a good game. So anyway, that is the bottom half of my top 20 Legend of Zelda games. I'm going to regroup here and come back and we'll do number 10 to 1. See you soon.